Hey guys, welcome back to my channel for another interesting video. If you enjoy the content you see here today, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. So today I'm bringing you a really interesting game played recently in the Bundesliga, German Bundesliga, between Deggendorf and Düsseldorf. This is the top category of the Bundesliga, where most of the professional players of the world play at some point in their careers. Today we're going to feature a game between Grandmasters Gleb Dudin from Hungary. Dudin is rated 25-45, he's 21 years old, very strong and young player, still hasn't reached the peak of his capabilities. Of course, with the black pieces, Wei Yi, a Chinese Grandmaster, 27-62, one of the best players in the world, and well known for his tactical capabilities. I'd actually dare say this is a tactical masterpiece. You're really going to enjoy this one. It's mind-boggling calculations. I'm going to try and break it down for you guys so you can sort of get into the heads of what these players are thinking during the game. So if you enjoy, remember, please subscribe. I'm still checking stats, and more than 50% of you guys out there watch my content but don't subscribe. It's really easy. Just click on the button below, totally free. And if you like, tell me where you're coming in from. It's always nice for me to see where my viewers are checking in from around the world. Okay, let's get with the game. So Dudin played d4. As I said before, this is the Bundesliga team games. Knight f6, c4, e6. Wei Yi is prepared to play the Nimzo Indian, which is one of his main defenses, both of him and the other top players. Dudin goes for knight to f3 to be able to play bishop to d2 against bishop to b4 check. This is called the Bogo Indian, and it's quite good as well. But we don't get the option of doubling pawns on c3 as in the Nimzo Indian. So against knight f3, some players go bishop to d4. Some players play b6, which is called the Queen's Indian, very solid. Some players go for the Benoni, specifically against knight f3, because this allows a Benoni, but without allowing white to go into the dangerous f4 lines, which are very dangerous, because white has played knight f3 first. So there are different move orders here. And then finally, as Wei Yi does, he goes for d5, which is just a queen's gambit. Probably after knight to c3, he'll play bishop to b4 and play the Ragozin variation. Okay, Dudin against d3, d5 plays g3. And now we're in the realms of the Catalan opening. As most of you know, I'm living in Barcelona. I lived in Barcelona for many years in Spain. And Barcelona is the capital of Catalonia. So every time I see a Catalan opening, it brings certain good memories personally to myself, because I live in Catalonia. However, I hardly ever play the Catalan myself, and when I do, I normally lose. So although I live here, it's not one of my favorite openings. But I've always thought it was a very good opening. So if you want to put it in your repertoire, you won't be making a mistake with white. Now, against the Catalan, there are many ways to play. This is not a theory channel. Suffice to say, bishop to b4 and bishop to e7, although it might seem you're losing a tempo, which in fact you are, the bishop on d2 is not very well placed and has to move further on. And on the other hand, we prevent the bishop going to fianchetto. And if white plays bishop c3, then he can't get the knight out to the best square. So it's an okay move, recognized by theory. Bishop g2, castle, castle. And here, again, many moves. The most popular is pawn takes pawn. Other moves are c6, very solid, and knight b to d7, which is Wei Yi's move, which does suggest that he might capture and play knight to b6 on the next move. So Dudin plays queen to c2, very sensible, protecting the pawn and vacating the square d1 for the rook. c6, bishop to f4, again very sensible. a5, just gaining some space on the queen side. If at some point white plays b3, a4 could be an idea. White plays rook to d1. As you can see, he's delaying the development of the knight, because if he goes knight to c3, he will lose this pawn. And if he goes knight to d2, that's okay. And in fact, he ends up doing this, but he's trying to wait for black to commit to his own idea. Finally, away goes b6, which suggests that he wants to play the bishop to b7 or to a6. And now white plays knight b to d2. So up to now, both players are playing correctly. No tactics involved. Very solid and stable chess. And here, bishop to b7, followed by rook a c8 would be perfectly fine. But in these positions, the bishop on f4 is quite nasty. It's not allowing you to put any piece on these three squares here. So a typical idea for black is to go knight to h5. And if possible, swap off the bishop. Now, if he gets to swap it off, that's great. But if he doesn't, the knight on h5 sometimes can be a weakness. And in fact, many games continue with bishop to e3 and the knight drops back. And if white wants a draw, he goes bishop to f4 and this will end up in a draw. So, I don't know whether Wei Yi didn't want a draw. Maybe he's outrating his opponent by 200 points. He wants to play for a win, or at least keep the game going. He doesn't play knight to f6. He plays bishop to a6, putting pressure on the pawn on e5. But after knight to e5, attacking c6, now he has a small problem. Because if he swaps the knights, the knight on h5 is out of play and could easily be in trouble at some point due to bishop to f3. So black has to be very careful here if he swaps the knights. Of course, Wei Yi understands that, and instead of exchanging knights, he plays rook to c8, not only protecting the pawn on c6, but also, if later on he plays c5, the rook, as we shall see in the game, plays against the queen. Now here, I would have personally played rook to c1. Why? Because I developed my last piece and I can fall back with the queen to b1 if need be. Of course, Dudin is much better than me. He obviously understands this as well. And even so, he prefers to play knight to f3. I checked with the computer. Both moves are possible and are correct. So nothing wrong with not playing rook to c1. And here Wei Yi decides to go for the tactics. Okay, so a solid player, a very solid player, would have played here knight to f6. He would have dropped back with the knight and probably started to swap off pieces. You can imagine this sort of situation is more or less solid, more or less equal. It's difficult to see black losing this game, but at the same time, it's difficult to see him winning the game because too many pieces have been swapped off and there's no tactics. But Wei Yi is not that type of player. Wei Yi doesn't shy away from playing a tactical game. He's very well known in the circuit as a very tactical and uncompromising player. Fantastic games Wei Yi has. He goes c5. And this is starting to get quite tactical because with the knight on f6, c5 would be standard. But with the knight on h5, you have to be very careful. There could be intermediate moves at any point hitting the knight in the middle of a combination. So Wei Yi is going for fire here. Okay, white plays b3, just keeping everything correct. But notice that he left his queen on c2. So Wei Yi plays a very nice move here, which is b5. Look at these three pawns and try and remember this idea as a pattern. A rook is hitting a queen on a file. There are two pawns in the middle. If you exchange pawns, you don't win material, but you can launch an attack with the third pawn, get the three on the row, and if any of these pawns are captured, we get in pawn takes pawn intermediate with the hit. So this is actually a tactical pattern that you would do well to remember because it can be useful in some scenarios. Now, there is a problem with this move, but Dudin did not take advantage of the drawback of this move. The drawback of this move is basically that we haven't brought the knight on h5 back into the game with knight to f6. So Dudin could have played here knight to g5, threatening mate. Now, black has two options here. If he swaps off the knight, black captures on d7, gets back the piece and wins the pawn. So this would be good for white, very good for white. So I'm thinking that against knight to g5, Wei Yi would have dropped back with the knight. And now, maybe the move that Dudin didn't see properly is bishop to h3. And the computer suggests that here, the tactics should favor white. There are some sacrifices on f7 followed by bishop to e6. There are mating threats on h7. This is a very dangerous position for black. And if he plays perfectly, he can hold, but it's a tricky position to play. So this was the best move for Dudin. But he didn't play it. Did he see it and he missed it? Did he miss it completely, the bishop h3 idea? Did Wei Yi spot this idea before playing b5 and went with it, even though it could have been dangerous for him? This is all part of risk assessment, chess personality, the way you see chess, the way you think your opponent might see the game. All these are psychological issues as well as specific visualization and pattern knowledge of the different ideas in the game. Anyway, Wei Yi played b5, Dudin played c takes d5, and now we get into a mind-boggling part of the game. Now, check this out. This is going to be amazing. C takes d4, hitting the queen and hitting the bishop. Now, all this had to be calculated by both players. Because now, white is losing a piece. If he moves the queen away, he loses the bishop. But Dudin was counting on knight to c6, blocking the attack on his queen, but at the same time attacking the queen on d8. But of course now, black captures the bishop on e3, wins a piece. And if white captures the queen, we get the queen back, so we'll be a piece up. And even the line, knight to c6 hitting on c7, we are able to save the piece with an extra piece. So I'm completely sure that when Dudin played c takes d5, c takes d4, knight to c6, d takes e3, he'd already calculated that he couldn't play knight takes queen. So what he had seen pawn takes pawn, opening up the possibility to get the piece back on d7 and keeping the threat on the queen. So for the moment, decent calculations. Okay. Black recaptures the pawn. And now here Dudin makes a mistake. And I suspect that when he went for this line, he had already calculated the move that he plays now. And when he got to this position, he just played the move he had calculated previously, which was bishop to h3, which, by the way, seems a very, very good move. Threatening check and getting back the knight. I mean, if that's the move he had calculated previously, I can easily see that he is going to play this move. However, Wei Yi had accounted to this move. And so the best move would have been queen to e4. Not so obvious, but very logical. You take the queen away from the pin, so now you are threatening the queen. You are also threatening the pawn on e6 with check. Doesn't seem such a bad move. Pawn takes pawn. Important to play king to f1 here. And now the best move for black is to eliminate the knight and drop back with the bishop to protect. And after queen takes e6 check and rook a to c1, knight to f6, and this is the key position, or would have been the key position of the variation, where black has two pieces for a rook, but it's a total mess. The computer just says 0-0 here. So more or less it says that anything can happen in this position. It's a mess. Theoretically, it's equal, but in practice, I mean, any player could win this position with two pieces for a rook. So queen to e4 was the correct move here. However, Dudin played bishop to h3, and that allows Wei Yi to play e takes f2 check, king to f1, and now check this variation out. Here, Wei Yi plays king to h8, sidestepping the check on e6, because he's prepared a line. However, the computer says that king to h8 is not the best move, and suggests instead to drop back with the knight, allow the check, allow knight to g5, which is tremendously strong. Now we're threatening rook takes knight, followed by mate on h7 if knight takes here. But the computer suggests that queen to b6 is the only move and holds. Rook takes d7, rook takes c6, hitting the queen, queen to f5, rook takes e6, queen takes e6, queen takes e6, knight takes e6, knight takes d7, knight takes f8, bishop takes f8, and black emerges with 3 pieces for a rook. I mean, this sequence is so difficult to see from this position here. It's so difficult. At every juncture, there might be 2 or 3 candidate moves. It's very difficult, not only to see fully, but to trust that you're not getting killed in any other line on the way. So difficult, even for a player such as Wei Yi. The only reason I can show you this line is because we have the engines that allow us to delve into the position, and that's why I bring you these fantastic variations. But for a player, it's very difficult. Wei Yi plays a move that most of us would have played. You just sidestep the check. And now, Dudin plays bishop to e6 anyway, but the computer suggests that here, the best move was to capture the queen, to capture on e6, and try and hold this position. The threat is against the rook and against the knight. Computer suggests that the best move here is b4, opening up the threat on e2. Knight f to d4 is the best move, attacking and defending. Rook to c3, take, and again, 2 pieces for a rook. Better for black, maybe even winning for black, but still a long game ahead. Instead of that, Dudin played bishop to e6, thinking this was obviously the best move. The threat, of course, is rook takes d7, and now the move that he probably missed at some point in his calculations, rook takes f3. Fantastic. With the idea that after e takes f3, we open up the diagonal with the check, and we can check here, pick up the knight, and push up the bishops. Fantastic calculations by Wei Yi. But Dudin doesn't hold back. Against rook takes f3, he sticks in rook takes d7, hitting the queen. But of course we have this queen to b6, protecting the pawn, and now we're also threatening knight takes g3 check, followed by rook takes g3 and checkmate on g1. Another variation that maybe Dudin missed somewhere along the line. For example, rook takes e7, we play check. What we don't do here is capture on c6 because we'll be mated. So we have to be careful about our back rank. So check, and now it's very difficult to prevent rook to g1 with mating threats. So Dudin doesn't have any other option to play except to capture the rook, check, block with the bishop, and now we take, of course, with the queen, hitting the rook and the pawn, and of course Wei Yi had calculated after rook takes e7, he had the crushing queen to f6 with a double attack on the rooks. And what's slightly funny or comical is that the pawn on f2, which has been there for a long time, is actually controlling the only square where white could save the 2 rooks. And here white had to resign because he's losing one of the 2 rooks and he's a piece down with no chances to follow up. I mean, this was an amazing game. And this is one of the games that normally, as it's played in a Bundesliga, you don't get to see. But as I'm scanning the games, looking for interesting miniatures, I was able to pick it up and bring it to you. A totally fantastic tactical masterpiece by Wei Yi. I hope you enjoyed. And if you did, leave a thumbs up, leave a comment below, subscribe to the channel, share with your friends. You can just share it on your WhatsApp groups and maybe other of your friends will enjoy these short tactical videos. For me, just say thank you once more for crossing those 1,000 subscribers. We're going to plan, as I promised, a live session at some point, probably a Sunday afternoon. I'll keep you informed in the video as soon as I have the date, which I can use. And I would really like to play against some of you guys. Probably will do it on chess.com or maybe even on Lichess, which I know a bit better. Play some games, talk, chat, and some of the games might appear on the channel. Take care, guys. Have fun. See you soon.